The thing I love about October, or as some would say Shocktober, is the positive attitude to everything that goes bump in the night, especially on Halloween.
He said it! He said it!
And it seems that being scared witless is an enjoyable pastime for most, especially with live events such as Tully's Farm, for example. But just imagine, if you will, actually being in that horrific scenario, where murderous individuals as well as supernatural entities are all fighting for your eternal soul.
Oh my god!
And this is exactly how it feels when playing The Evil Within. But to appreciate this horror-inspired game, we have to go back to the past to learn more. Now, the horror genre has been a staple within the world of gaming ever since Haunted House was released for the Atari, and from here other titles dabbled in the macabre and the supernatural.
Nice.
But it was the horror survival subgenre that proved to be popular with players. Titles such as Resident Evil, Alone in the Dark, and even Silent Hill were setting the standard for other horror games to follow. Eventually there were other games within the horror genre that were doing their own thing to scare gamers, such as Dead Space, which utilised sounds for its jump scares. Sadly though, over time the horror survival genre used in video games was becoming somewhat stale and quite predictable. Gone was the shock factor that made players run from the screen in terror, and in its place were video games that focused on over-the-top action. Now, this action horror genre isn't actually that bad, especially when it comes to Dante's Inferno, which is great fun to play.
It's so bad.
But come on, who doesn't love being scared or shocked, especially in video games? You know, ones that get your pulse racing while being stalked by an unseen entity. Image, an image that fitted perfectly within the Friday the 13th franchise. Sure, we got used to zombies and even monstrous creatures terrorizing us gamers, but just imagine, if you will, for a moment, your greatest fears being used against you. It was this ideology of preying on the fears of gamers and non-gamers alike that led to The Evil Within gracing the world of gaming in 2014. The strange events surrounding The Evil Within all starts with a mass murder at Beacon Hospital, where Detective Sebastian Castellanos has to investigate this gruesome massacre. Eventually he witnesses a horrific scene on the CCTV of the hospital.
Good morning!
One by one, his fellow officers are all slain by a mysterious figure in white, and as if he was watching a horror movie itself, the hooded entity disappears from the monitor screen, appearing behind the detective before everything goes black. Waking up to the sound of music, Sebastian finds himself upside down, slightly dazed and somewhat confused. But it doesn't take him long to realise that there are other carcasses surrounding him.
I was not expecting that, were you?
But suddenly, Sebastian notices a masked figure slowly slicing and hacking into a neighbouring body. And fearing for his life, Sebastian hangs there motionless for what seems to be an eternity.
You can do it! Cut his freaking balls off!
Eventually, Sebastian does escape this room of pain, but I don't want to spoil it for you. But it's from here that a nightmarish adventure begins. Gameplay for The Evil Within is from a third-person perspective, with an over-the-shoulder view, which of course was made famous by Capcom's Resident Evil 4. And very much like the classic zombie series, gamers will find themselves being enveloped into a distorted, nightmarish world, full of disfigured and terrifying creatures. One encounter that comes to mind is when you enter a certain room. You know what's going to happen, but you're completely unprepared for what actually does happen. But all I can say is run. Run for your life, for Christ's sake, run.
Okay.
There are other moments while playing The Evil Within that will send a shiver down your spine and make you question the very fabric of reality. Is it real, or the subject of a crazed and deluded mind? I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting a really weird feeling. You know, when you're in a dream with no control, as if everything around me is nothing but a simulation. Upon release, The Evil Within was well received by gamers, who enjoyed this welcome return to the horror survival genre. Obviously there are flaws here and there, but this only adds to the overall experience of The Evil Within. Trust me though, if you want a game that will make you hide behind the sofa, I highly recommend this horror survival title.
Shut up and take my money!
From the success of The Evil Within, there were two DLCs, known as The Assignment and The Conquest. Both focused on new locations, even more grotesque enemies, as well as revealing the answers to some of the mysteries of the main game. And of course there was a third DLC pack known as The Executioner, where gamers got to play as the Keeper, a terrifying individual that would make even the bravest of men quiver with fear. And such was the popularity of The Evil Within that a sequel would soon follow, aptly named The Evil Within 2, which takes place 3 years after the original. However, that's for another time. Overall, The Evil Within took the concept of survival horror and made it even more macabre than other popular titles. That sense of feeling powerless was truly felt when playing The Evil Within, where survival depended on the actions of players. As if in a real life scenario, staying alive meant avoiding confrontation at all costs, unless of course you had a secret weapon.
This is my boomstick!
Hopefully there will be a third installment of the Evil Within gaming series, where perhaps the STEM machine from the previous games has become sentient and begins to stalk new victims for its own gratification, trapping helpless souls within its digital prison. Either way, us gamers are lucky to have the Evil Within series to quell that lust for the supernatural and the macabre. But the question is, how far would you go to escape the simulation? Anyway, come back next time where I reveal my top 13 horror games to play on Halloween. Thank you so much for watching and see you next game.